Welcome to This Week with EdSurge. I'm Ira Apfel, Editorial Director here at EdSurge. What happens to a policy the moment it leaves the page and enters an actual classroom? Our first guest spent a year finding out by coding AI policy from 122 school districts around the country. Our second guest helped write her own district's AI policy from scratch. Jody's been studying it from a distance. Tamara's been building it from the inside. Let's start with the data. Dr. Jody Britten is interim CEO of the AI in Education Studio, an organization dedicated to the responsible and purposeful adoption of artificial intelligence in education. And she just published a study coding AI policies from 122 districts and schools across 38 states. She joins us today to talk about the study's findings. Welcome to the show, Jody.
Hi, Ira. Thanks so much for having me.
So you built out a 5-level framework to code these policies from actively promoting AI at level 1 all the way down to outright prohibition at level 5. So before we get into the numbers, walk us through what separates a level 1 district from a level 5 district in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. I think the clearest way to describe this is really that level 1 district has made a really proactive decision. The AI is part of what students learn, part of the work that teachers do, part of the system in which administrators and systems run. So you see things like, districts deploying AI tools at the administrative offices, all the way down to the high school classrooms. And they're kind of explicitly writing in to their work ways that they can reduce barriers. One of the counties in North Carolina that we looked at, I think, was a really good example. They had a phased rollout plan. They had pilot schools. They had a district-wide timeline. These things move so quickly, right? Like we can't write a policy around a tool that exists today. We have to write a policy around a vision and a mission and kind of our goals. So that institutional intention piece was the anchor in that district. And I think that made all the difference in the world. Comparatively, I think a level 5 district hasn't really made a decision. They've kind of drawn a line and said, it's almost disciplinary and it's really student focused. What we saw in that level 5 was there's no real pathway for authorized use of these things and no real understanding of what you can have AI do. We've kind of called it the human to AI continuum, where like, this is what AI can do for me. This is what I always need to do as a human, whether it's an administrator writing an email or a teacher writing a newsletter or grading communication or whatever, all the way down to a student. There's no path forward. It's just don't. And largely, it was a message to students. It wasn't a message to faculty. But then the faculty and staff didn't really have any guidance at all. So much of this is dependent on where that leadership sits in the moment where they put pen to paper, that it's just, you need to have somebody paying attention and somebody thinking about your work, But I think that's probably the best way to describe that.
Now, before we dive into the numbers, the actual research and results, I am curious, how did you go about your research process? You found 122 districts and schools across 38 states, and you have a great database that's in the article, and we'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
But I was really kind of struck by the depth of your research.
We have heard from teachers for a very long time that because we've trained, people across our team have trained thousands of teachers at this point, thousands of organizations. And what kept happening, Ira, was teachers kept coming back to us and saying, okay, great, I know how to use this. But I'm getting like 3 to 4 months into it and really want to push the gas and do some cool stuff. And I either hit a policy wall or a lack of policy wall, And parallel to that experience, we were having districts come to us and saying, do you have a AI policy database? Do you have examples? Can you give us feedback on our AI policy? Which are great things. Love to have those questions. But we as a team did not have a really good handle on what is a good policy and what isn't. So having that kind of question in mind of what policies exist out there we started to do kind of a systematic review where we just did a basic Google search, gained for AI policies that were out there. What we found it was very scattered. It was scattered across board documents. It was scattered across student handbooks, very scattered across locations and whatnot. So we kind of arrived at this core group that we did our initial analysis on. But when we started that analysis, we really went through and read everything and then really went through and thought about, okay, what are the buckets that these are going through? So it was very much a qualitative process of just thinking through what are we seeing and where things are aligned, but then also thinking about the work that we've been doing and helping teachers build and students and families build and where this stuff is going compared to where it was in 2022, 2023, and trying to kind of position things around not only what is currently happening, but what's possible.
So now we've talked about your process and how it all started.
Yes.
Let's dive into the numbers. 44% of districts landed at level 3, conditional and teacher directed. That's nearly half. Why did so many districts land in that middle zone instead of picking a clear direction, either 1 or 5?
Because it's really comfortable. Level 3 is kind of where you land when you want to say something without really committing to anything. It's probably the most formulaic at this point. AI may be used with teacher permission. Cite any AI use. Unauthorized use constitutes academic dishonesty. All the things, right? Like it checks the box. It gives teachers some discretion. It kind of protects the district a little bit, but it doesn't really build capacity, so it doesn't really define what good looks like. What I was shocked at is how many of those level 3s are placing the burden of judgment onto individual teachers.
And that's based on the level 3 finding, you say, or even up to a level 1 finding?
Between 2 and 4 is where we saw a lot of focus on the teachers making the decision. When Carolyn at ISTE and I had a conversation this summer at conference, we were kind of talking about level 3 is it's almost a placeholder. We're kind of by and large hanging out in the middle and not moving, not committing, not saying no, but we're unsure. And I understand that because these things are moving very quickly. But at the same time, we don't want students getting in trouble or unable to leverage something that could truly help them. Because in math, you can do this, but in history, you can do this. And in biology, you can do this.
In the findings, it showed that almost a quarter of districts and schools are restricting or banning AI outright. And you found that Florida averaged 4.5 on your scale and Texas averaged a full 5.0. What's driving those clusters?
Yeah. I think in both of those states, the entry point for AI was more than likely and consistently academic integrity. It was student focused. Don't use it to cheat. Don't use it to generate your stuff. And I think when that's your origin story, like that's your story, is one of, we don't want you to use this to cheat, which I fully understand. But I think in those states in particular, many states wrote their policy very much in line with like plagiarism language, things that you would see in like an academic dishonesty policy or an academic honesty policy. They just kind of threw AI onto that definition of plagiarism. And when there's no separate process, this is a totally different technology. This is a totally different moment for all of us. And if we use the same process and we don't use separate thinking or more advanced thinking in this, then we get what we get,
So if you're listening to this right now, you're a superintendent, a principal, a head of a school, what have you, and your district is kind of sitting right in the middle. Maybe you're already at level 3 with your policy, or level 3 sounds kind of good to you.
Yeah.
What's the first concrete step you tell them to take this fall?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people have come up to me after I speak somewhere or they read something and they say, okay, I need to rewrite my policy. And I always say, don't do that yet. Figure out what's happening. Do the surveys, do the little interviews, put together a working group where you have people across your district knowing what's happening out there, you know? There is a huge disconnect right now in what especially superintendents think is happening and what is happening. An example of that, one of the school districts, they had, I think 80% of their teachers were paying out of pocket for their own tools that weren't provided by the district at all. 20% were using the tools that the district was paying for, or maybe even less than 20%. You know, you need to know those things before you go into this because it changes everything. You know, you have to take time to get that data. I think it's really dangerous to think about how we serve our students before we think about how we serve our system or how we create the infrastructure in our system. And it's very easy for us to make rules for students. You can't wear this, you can't do that, but how's the system responding and intentionally building that? Like, that's where you need to focus. Take the time to sit with the teachers or your district partners or your students even and say, like, what are you doing that's really cool? Show me, you know? We have kids in my house all the time. They're always here. And I love to just listen to them talk about how they're using these things because it's not to cheat, it's to help, and I think those stories have to inform this policy. And, the superintendent a while back said, Jody, I'm not ever going to be all about AI. Guess what? I don't want you to be. And it shouldn't be all about AI. It should be about what you value and what you're committed to and what learning experiences you want to develop for your students. Then think about how AI layers on top of that.
Jody, thanks for putting real numbers behind a conversation that's mostly been vibes up until now.
You're welcome. It's been interesting. It's been a journey. We still have more to do, and we'll continue to update that dashboard as we go here.
Absolutely. That's Dr. Jody Britten, Interim CEO of the AI and Education Studio. Jody's research found that only about 15% of districts actually connect their own policy back to their state's guidance. Our next guest can tell you exactly what the gap looks like from the inside. Tamara Clark is a technology integration facilitator for Birmingham City Schools in Alabama with more than 20 years in education. This year, she joined the EdSurge Voices of Change Fellowship.
And we are recording live this week from ISTE Live and ASCD Annual in Orlando. Tamara's work centers on AI literacy and STEM equity, both in her district role and in her own research. Tamara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ira.
So you've spent more than 20 years in education, and now you're stepping into a writing fellowship. What drew you to Voices of Change, and why now, after 20 years?
So I have, of course, had a lot of experience, the good, the bad. I definitely want to share, those real raw experiences through my writing, and I thought that would have been a great opportunity to be able to share and just to see what others are doing in that writing process also.
Have you done any writing before this, or is this basically the first time you're writing publicly about yourself and your experiences?
So scholarly, yes. Currently, I'm working on a dissertation, and of course, that involves a lot of writing. So with EdSurge, it's more of a personal narrative. So kind of switching back and forth between those two. When I initially started writing for EdSurge, it was, okay, you're kind of writing on a scholarly level, and we need more personal narrative. So from that aspect, but I have not been published, never published.
And how is it for you having to bring up the personal? Because again, it's a real switch from the academic voice to this is about me and what I'm going through as an educator.
So initially it was hard, but when it's something that you've experienced, it's not hard to tell. It's just the way you're telling it at this point. And I'm so excited about this opportunity because a lot of misconceptions are taken in education, and coming from a classroom, I'm able to really tell that true experience and what's really going on.
What are you hoping to add to the conversation this year?
I definitely, it's definitely a lot of AI talk out there with the new programs, new initiatives. So the great part about what I'm doing is the fact that I actually have doctoral research. I'm actually working on AI and pedagogy and what that looks like, also with the ethical implications. So I'm able to really dive deep into what's going on in the world of AI as it relates to education. And I can bring that information to the fellowship through my writing.
As an educator, what frustrates you or what has frustrated you in the past 2 or 3 years with AI?
Lack of understanding. AI is saturated in almost any area of your life my life at this point, and you hear people talking about it. I want to give you an example. We were working on a lesson when I was a media specialist at the time, and we were just kind of going back with one topic we were working on, and one of the students had a real answer that made me think twice. And, we talked about it and I asked her, well, where did you get your answer from? And she was totally transparent. She went into her messenger in Facebook and was talking to the chat bot. So that right there was very innovative of that student, even though she wasn't, I'm like, how did you get on Facebook? She wasn't on the network, the school's network, because it's blocked. But the innovativeness of that student being able to go in and find an answer for what we were talking about, very creative, but it's scary too. Because you're depending on the answers from the chat bot or AI, but do you have knowledge of what we're talking about? So just being able to get the kids to think critically and use their own mind going into what they're looking for out of AI. So that's really heavy on my heart because I really want the students to know, hey, you still have to think through this process on your own.
Absolutely. Your focus is AI literacy and STEM equity, and those are two things that don't always get talked about together. So how does equity shape the way you think about rolling out AI in a district like Birmingham?
Knowledge, just making sure everybody fully understands the ethical implications and everything that goes into AI. So I had the privilege of co-leading our AI governance policy committee at on district level. We pulled in stakeholders, teachers, administrators, students, parents. And in our initial meeting, we started talking about, AI, what it did and what it does and what it does not do. But I realized the knowledge base was so broad. So we kind of had to go back and revisit our roadmap for meeting because we need to make sure we train those who were helping us develop the policy and make sure they knew and understood AI. So that right there was really an eye-opener, and that showed me, hey, we really have to buckle down on AI literacy from the top and work our way down.
In your school district, and I know it's a large school district, so I don't want you to overgeneralize, but what is the perception or feeling about AI from other educators, students, parents, and administrators? Are they generally cautiously accepting of it? Is it a hostile environment? What's it like?
It's a split. It's a big split. You have some who are the AI enthusiasts and they're integrating it into everything they do. And you have some, few that are like, I don't touch it. I'm not interested. We understand we do have this platform, but if I'm not interested, I'm not going to use it. Even when it comes to the age. Even when it comes to the age, because you do have those older veterans that's like, hey, it's helping me increase productivity. I'm in.
The fellowship cohort this year is focused on AI and technology in the classroom. And as a technology integration facilitator, you're the person teachers come to when they don't know where to start. What's the most common question you're getting right now from educators?
How to use it effectively, how to not so much increase productivity, but how to be innovative and not just be passive users of AI, create products with the use of AI and take that to the students where they're creating products with the use of AI.
A lot of the national conversation about AI in education assumes every school has the same starting point, same devices, same bandwidth, same access. What does that conversation get wrong when you're talking about a district like yours?
I don't want to say we're ahead. We're a large district. We do have a lot of great resources. So that is a positive for us. But the starting point, we did have an issue with where to start. especially after we met with our governance committee. That was an eye-opener for us because, like I said, it was just the knowledge base was so broad. You had some that didn't even use it, hadn't even tried to touch it, but they were there. They showed up. So that said a lot. And then you had those tech, the AI experts. So that's pretty much where we started at. As far as the resources, we didn't have an issue in that area. I can look at other areas in the state, those rural areas. I've heard conversations about the bandwidth issue, not being connected. And that right there, that can make it very challenging.
One of the goals of the fellowship is to put educator voices into public conversations alongside researchers and policymakers. Do you think that district level practitioners like yourself are actually being heard in those rooms right now?
Yes, I do in those rooms, but to a certain degree. And I don't get into the politics of the education. I do understand to a degree, but I think it's split even when it comes to teacher voice.
Mm-hmm. If you had one piece of advice to give to listeners or viewers about AI, and the audience tends to be educators, what would you give them?
Do your own research. Don't wait to be taught. Look it up yourself. I look at different programs, but first of all, get the basics. Learn what AI is, learn what it does, learn about those implications.
Tamara, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. So we'll link to the Voices of Change Fellowship page in the show notes so listeners can follow Tamara's work as it publishes this year.
Jody's data showed that most AI policy gets written in a bit of a vacuum, aimed at students disconnected from state guidance. Tamara just showed us why. When her district's governance committee first sat down, the knowledge in the room was so uneven, they had to pause and retrain everyone before they could write a single line. Turns out Jody's numbers weren't wrong. Ask anyone who's actually sat on a policy committee, like Tamara, and they'll tell you the knowledge gap is real. Before we go, if you've got 30 seconds, please drop a rating or a quick review on your favorite podcast player. It genuinely helps other educators find the show. That's it for this week with EdSurge. Thanks to Jody Britten and Tamara Clark for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. For the EdSurge team, I'm Ira Apfel. We'll be back in your feed next week.